And now moving on right along, we have a captivating fireside chat. It is time to discuss supporting infrastructure development through smart investment decisions. It is my pleasure to invite our guest speaker, Mr. Djerejian, Group Head of Investment and Legal at the Red Sea Global, and the chat moderator, Mr. David Clifton, the Regional Director at Faithful+Gould. Welcome to the stage.
Well, good afternoon all. Look, it's an exciting time. With a large amount of projects going on around here, $1.25 trillion US. It's quite something. It's quite a transformational number. I mean, beggars belief in terms of scale. And certainly in the 16 years that I've been here, there's not much that's trumped it. Before launching into this, perhaps because you do work on a remote project, perhaps you could give a quick hi, what's going on Red Sea Global before we sort of launch into where we're going to fund it?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, first of all, I just want to thank His Excellency Minister Hogale, under whose auspices this infrastructure convention is occurring. He's on our board and a big supporter of us, so our appreciation to him. Listen, in terms of Red Sea Global, we're operating at full throttle. We're actually opening up 3 hotel assets this year.
Yep.
We've got the Six Senses, which is one of our inland hotels, which is being handed over to the brand as we speak, and we've got the Ritz-Carlton Reserve and the St. Regis Umahat, which are on the Umahat Islands, so
Yep.
Mono Islands, which are opening before the end of the year and also being handed over to Marriott. More importantly, beyond that, our hub island of Shura Island, which has 11 hotels, we are already under robust construction on that. And looking to finalize those 11 hotels towards the end of next year.
Yep.
So it's a pretty Herculean task, but we're moving very assiduously on that. As you probably also know, we recently rebranded ourselves Red Sea Global.
Yes.
We were a Red Sea development company before. Part of the reason, obviously, we're focused on Saudi Arabia. John, with whom I've worked in the past, our CEO, has inherited about a dozen projects up and down the Red Sea coast. Another very large one is Amala, which we'll talk about, which has a bit more of a wellness focus, while we like to talk about Red Sea being more barefoot luxury island archipelago versus the more manicured wellness of Amala. But we're racing forward on Red Sea, we're moving quickly on Amala, and then we have a dozen other projects in the pipeline up and down the Red Sea coast. So it's truly a very exciting time at Red Sea.
That's fantastic. I mean, my company's got a fair amount of people working up there, so I've been up recently, but there is a lot going on, and it's an exciting time, not just, of course, across your project, but we look across everything. But it does bring us to the immediate question, which is what the subject is: how do we support the funding and the driving of investment, and how do we attract that into this country? We've got a notional target of $100 billion of FDI that we're looking to attract into the kingdom. I mean, what's your perspective as the most attractive things to do? I mean, you're obviously excited by the market. You're obviously driven by the fact that you want to be here because this is a very exciting time to be here. I mean, what's your initial take on how do we get it going?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, big picture. To me, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. It reminds me, and we're dating ourselves a little bit, or at least I'm dating myself, but it reminds me a little bit of China in the 90s, or perhaps in the early 2010s. We can talk about Asia. That's a separate subject in terms of where the PRC is right now. But the amount of infrastructure and development activity that's going on in the kingdom right now, as we all know, is simply unprecedented and breathtaking. And it's happening also under the aegis of the Crown Prince and His Royal Highness. It's coming with real direction. And it's coming in a way that we're having to diversify away from hydrocarbons as being one of the pillars of Vision 2030. So the technology that we are now looking to leverage in the renewable space, and I'm not a technology expert, but I'm speaking very broadly, those were not opportunities that existed in China and the PRC when they were going through a similar type of major, robust activity. So it actually, to me, makes the moment even more special. You've got issues in the global economy, on the macroeconomic issues in Europe and the U.S., potentially some recessionary headwinds. You've got potential depreciation pressures in Asia-Pac, as you know better than I as an economist. But here we have very positive tailwinds, presuming commodity prices remain reasonably elevated. And so it's kind of like a combination of a lot of wonderful things coming together at the right time, which gives us a lot of tailwinds to project forward.
And to be honest with you, it's if you look at historical trends, governments have used infrastructure funding as a means to stimulate economies. It just happens that we've met up with the two factors overlapping each other perfectly. So we have Vision 2030, and then on top of that, we've got a high commodity price in terms of the oil in relative terms for recent years. So we're getting more fiscal availability from a government level and subsequently a sovereign wealth level. Do you think that there's an attractiveness sort of like between maybe GCC or maybe Middle East in general as sort of interchange investments? There's something, because we've seen the EDF deal come through with Mubadala and...
So are we talking a little breaking?
Yeah.
So this is a little bit breaking news, but we did sign yesterday a consortium for PPP for Amala with EDF, which is obviously the French utility giant, but also Masdar that you will know well from your time in the Emirates. And
Yep.
It's interesting because obviously these giga projects are national champions, and we
Yes.
know we're going to have very significant and robust interest from KSA nationals, KSA institutions, kind of the home market.
Yep.
But going beyond that, I think there is more cross-pollination, and I think the pie is large enough for the GCC more broadly to be looking at opportunities in different directions. And even as we see with EDF, you have a European player that's coming in and investing in a pretty remote, I don't know how many people have been to Amala or the emerging location that is Amala, but it's a pretty remote location, and you've got a lot of capital that's being deployed to deliver a pretty path-breaking utility solution.
So, I mean, it's interesting to see that there is some international interest when we look at sort of
Yep.
big French companies, and we see the same with Aoula, to be honest, where they've got Macron as a sort of a sponsor with His Royal Highness. And so we're starting to see that kind of play out a little bit. Do you think that there has been as much attractiveness to here as yet, or do you think is there something we could do better to try and make this more interesting for some of these major international organisations to put a bit more into doing investing into
I
these
honestly
projects?
think that people are still catching up to the story.
Right. Okay.
We're here, we're living and breathing it, whether we're in Riyadh or in Jeddah or in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. We see what's happening around us every day, and we understand the scope of it. I think obviously there are forums like this one or FII in October and many others where investor cognizance is increasing. And I think His Royal Highness and his ministers and others have done a great job in terms of delivering the message that Saudi, it's like people have described it as a startup nation. It's open for business, there's a lot going on. But I still think there's a bit of reticence. It's a bit far from certain money centers. And I think, the risk really is for some people maybe to be late to the party because it's moving at a very quick pace.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting because there has been some reticence, and people are sort of have stood back and said, wait and see, but now you're right. You're starting to see, now maybe I should engage, but actually the first mover advantage is kind of gone in many instances for some of these multinationals. And also, they're like super tankers. They don't tend to move very quickly.
True.
They take time. And the one thing that we don't seem to give ourselves is any time.
Sorry, one thing
we don't seem to give ourselves in this region, it's a regional thing, is any time.
Yes, everything has to be yesterday.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Whereas these major conglomerates don't tend to be able to move at that kind
Unless
of pace.
it's bukra, which happens too sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, but look, we're looking at the investment, but we've got a global situation where we've had interest rates rising. They probably haven't stopped yet, and I mean, the Fed's going to probably raise its interest rate certainly once more this year. We expect the Bank of England, the ECB, probably followed by BOJ. So we've got the cost of borrowing going up. Is there anything that we think that we should be doing that's a bit different to be able to bring in capital to be able to deliver these projects? I mean, there's a global fight for liquidity, and you're right. We've got recessionary trends. There's deflationary pressure currently coming in through China. We've had a bit of a pivot to the east as a region, which could have a little bit of a consequential effect. Or do we think that we should be looking to governments to invest harder and to try and stimulate that?
I really think the private sector is going to come, and by that I also mean more from the international private sector. And I think seeing is believing.
Yep.
John likes to say that. And when we bring visitors to our site and they actually see that this isn't just some remote vision, but it's actually bricks and mortar, shovel in the ground, projects are being delivered and executed and assets are being opened. When people see that with their own eyes, they understand that there's a market opportunity that can really be captured and monetized here. And so I think as Vision 2030 keeps coming to fruition, more and more international investors are going to be understanding that how real this is.
Yes.
And I think, to your point, that sometimes you get to the party a little bit too late, I do think the breadth of ambition and the amount of projects that are occurring is so large that there will still be sufficient capacity for KSA players, GCC players, and indeed international capital beyond. You know, you've got the likes of BlackRock has opened up an office here.
Yes.
You know, that's very sophisticated capital. They don't need to be doing it, but they're doing it for various strategic reasons. The other Blackstone, of course, my background's more on the PE side in terms of investing as opposed to infrastructure per se, but Blackstone has been in the market for a long time with PIF and other local partners. So I think smart capital is here and more will come.
Okay. And I suppose we're looking at this from a global perspective. Where do you think that we are targeting, or is it just anywhere around the world? Is it specific markets or specific sectors that we are looking at that we think are probably most attractive for the kingdom for international investing, or is it just a very broad palette that you see?
Well, I mean, I think obviously I'm more focused on real estate and hotels because that's my knitting in terms of what we're delivering. Everyone I think in the room knows that they're very ambitious initiatives going on in other sectors like mining, for instance. Yeah. But I think one common theme is the growing criticality of ESG in most quarters. Yeah. It's not something that's just a nice to have and people talk about it and stick it in their annual report. I think people understand that, well, from a variety of perspectives, but one is that there are third-party credentializing requirements for ESG that are really important reputationally, just showing that one is a good corporate citizen given the critical climate challenges that we're facing. But also, I think guests, just looking at the most basic for me in the hotel business, heads in beds, feet in sheets, I think guests are now judging where they will go in part for not just how good the service is and how lovely the water is, and we'll hopefully have great service, and we do have astonishingly beautiful water, but they're going to want to know, is this a location that is a sustainable one? Mm-hmm. It's part of the decision-making matrix, and John likes to say we're trying to move from sustainability to regeneration, and what he means by that is sustainability means we're inheriting a place and we just don't want to leave it worse than we found it, yep. Right? And we don't think that's sufficiently ambitious. We want to regenerate. We want to improve it. We want to try to have carbon capture targets that are more ambitious. And that's a real challenge for us because it's not every day that you have a giga-project size project that's being built in a pristine island archipelago. Yeah. And we truly take it extraordinarily seriously, and even when it impacts our bottom line, because these solutions are sometimes more expensive, but we think, A, it's the right thing to do, and B, we think over the long term, it'll be accretive to us as a business.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think that is something that now is on everybody's agenda all of the time.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single organization that I've dealt with that doesn't have that as one of its modus operandi in this day and age. I mean, with that, you've got, as you said, the cost of it being more expensive than just doing the old route, which is we should just knock it down and build something new. Yeah. And so with that, does that cause funding challenges, or you find that your funders are actually quite receptive to that, the fact that you are pushing the environmental and safety agenda?
I don't think it causes funding challenges per se. So we've had a successful collaboration with Aqua, which I think most people in this room will know, Mohammed Nayan's yep. Group, and now this new consortium that we've announced today with EDF and Masdar. Both of those utility solutions are premised off being completely off-grid, 100% renewable. And there are things that come up in negotiations where, okay, we've got these solar panels that are meant to capture the energy that's going to drive the renewables, but of course, we can't rely on that completely because we have, it's as if it's like 10,000 family households equivalent that we're needing to 24/7 ensure that they have power for. What if we haven't captured enough solar energy in the moment? And again, I'm not a scientist, but we've got these extremely large battery storage facilities, but there are backup solutions to that that could involve biofuel. Well, biofuel, the pricing of that can be a bit erratic. Yeah. People might have not the greatest visibility. So when you're in a negotiation with a consortium, there can be pretty detailed discussions around how are we going to think about biofuel pricing if we need to use that as a solution. But I think because everyone's seized of the imperative and because they see the scope of the opportunity, we find creative workarounds and we negotiate to a win-win solution for all sides, usually.
Okay.
Inshallah.
So if I was to ask you then, what challenges do you see in attracting the funding or the infrastructure funding that we require? Because let's face it, $1.25 trillion worth of projects. That, to put it into perspective, is roughly around 1.1% of global GDP, which is quite a significant number. So there are some challenges within there, and what do we think we can do to help smooth some of that or make it more interesting?
Look, honestly, and I know this will sound a little bit self-serving, but from my perspective, my issue right now is where people are knocking on our door. I've got a bit of a queue in terms of investment opportunities, really. I'm not saying that's all in the kind of renewable space or infrastructure per se, but we have a lot of investors, and they're not only KSA investors. I mean, just quickly, so, some of the deals that we've done, we partnered with Tariq Mutlaq, which is a prominent Saudi family office for the Jumeirah Hotel. We did a joint venture for that on Shura. We have other joint ventures like that are gestating with prominent KSA family offices. We did a large debt financing that was got green certification, 14 billion SAR. So there has been market appetite for what we're offering. But to answer your question, I guess, is what could we do better? I think it's just people just need to keep telling the story of what's going on in Kingdom. And I think, you might, and this is meant really, it's a real fireside chat, so I want to hear a little bit, frankly, a little bit from your perspective, from maybe knowing the Emirates a bit better than I do, my being more focused on Saudi, but it feels like the GCC more broadly, there's so much activity going on and the pie is so large that opportunities are starting to go in different directions as opposed to a zero-sum game.
Yeah, no, pretty much. I mean, the inter-trade, so to speak, between the region. I mean, we've seen lots of announcements. We've seen the UAE going into Jordan and Egypt with an industrial strategy. We've seen that Mubadala, one of the big three sovereign wealth funds, is sort of inverting itself to be less Emirates focused and more overseas focused, and they are biased towards a lot of sustainable type solutions, providing they've got a business case. They're no fools. So there is a lot of potential in terms of that interrelationship work between the likes of the Qatars and the UAE and the KSA, and there is a strong focus at looking for the ROI, but and certainly also trying to shore up the sort of political sustainability of the region. And so there's a lot of work that goes on within that. So you've got a lot of the Arab investment funds in terms of placing money into the development of, say, Egypt or Jordan, as we just mentioned. So there's quite a lot of that going on. But I certainly think that from a business opportunity perspective, the sovereign wealth funds will look at the other countries with a reasonably decent view, but they're very much focused on it being a good business opportunity. If it's not going to give me the ROI or the RR that they're looking for, they're not interested. But with that, there's so many opportunities within Saudi Arabia. I do actually believe that this won't be the last. It will be one of many that are coming through, especially because whereas they were quite insular in terms of their investment strategies historically, they've gone very much more external as they're looking at trying to recession-proof themselves, really. And also that means I also think that you're going to be able to see governments look at utilising the infrastructure investments to create stimulus within their own economies to a point, so that we don't end up in a situation like the US and Europe and to a point the Asia where the interest rates are creating a recessionary headwind. So that I think will actually work, and I do believe that this region will probably avoid quite nicely any kind of recessionary headwinds unless we see a massive collapse in oil price, which doesn't seem to be on the table at the moment from OPEC+. But again, that's not a commodity I'm an expert in. So I think that that there is a very good story to tell, and I think there's a lot of interest, and that's how I'd leave it, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, and I would say just anecdotally, right, just the traffic in Riyadh, right?
Oh, God.
We see the amount of individuals that are moving to town. You see more of an expatriate community that's coming. I mean, people are sensing deal flow and opportunities, and I think there's a sense that the capital market, Tadawul is a reasonably sophisticated market. there are high-quality bankers and lawyers that are operating in the market. You can get deals done here, and you can get deals done here quickly. And you can execute expeditiously. So I think it's people vote with their feet, and it feels, I've been here 18 months, and it's gone by in a flash, and I feel like you're at the very beginning of a 10, 15-year journey.
Yeah. Right.
You really do.
I do think that's correct. I agree with you. I think this is a journey that's not a 3-year story. It's a 20-year game.
No. Yeah. Because even, obviously there are a lot of aspirations focused on Vision 2030, which is, just 7 years away. But the amount of activity going into that, there's going to be a back end that continues for a long while beyond. So.
Excellent. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time now, Greg. But thank you very much for your views.
Thank you very much.
And we'll leave it there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.